What if I told you that some of the most beloved stars in Hollywood, people who once knelt beside their beds in prayer and swore by the Bible, eventually turned their backs on faith completely? They weren't born rebels. They were raised in religious homes, surrounded by scripture, sermons, and the promise of salvation. But somewhere along the way, something shattered. Welcome to this revealing journey into the hearts and minds of three Hollywood legends who lost their belief in God. If you enjoy uncovering the hidden truths behind fame and faith, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. We're all on this search for meaning together, connected across time and distance. Now let's begin with one of the most unexpected stories of all, Brad Pitt. Born in Springfield, Missouri, Brad was raised in a conservative Southern Baptist household. Church wasn't optional. It was the center of life. Sunday services, Wednesday youth groups, Christian summer camps, it was all part of the package. His parents were devout, and Brad, as a child, followed suit. He memorized Bible verses, believed in heaven and hell, and even led prayers at the dinner table. But something inside him never quite settled. Even as a teenager, he started questioning what he was taught. Why was God so silent in the face of suffering? Why were certain people condemned just for thinking differently? These weren't just fleeting doubts, they grew louder with time. Brad described his upbringing as one of emotional confinement. He once said, "Religion works because it holds people back from doing bad things, but it can also keep people from thinking for themselves." He went through a spiritual transformation in his 20s, experimenting with different philosophies and belief systems. He flirted with agnosticism, explored Buddhism, and even spoke about moments of existential clarity. But over the years, the pull toward religion faded entirely. In interviews, he began to openly identify as an atheist. He said, "I grew up being told God is going to take care of everything, and it doesn't always work out that way." That disillusionment left a mark. Pitt didn't lose faith in a dramatic explosion of anger or rebellion. It eroded slowly, like a stone weathered by time. What's perhaps most intriguing is how his loss of faith quietly echoes through the characters he plays. From the vengeful detective in Say 7 to the disillusioned soldier in Fury, Brad often chooses roles haunted by morality, justice, and the absence of divine order. It's as if, through fiction, he's still searching for answers. But make no mistake, his journey away from God is real, raw, and deeply personal. He once said he now finds meaning in family, art, and human connection, rather than in any spiritual dogma. For Brad Pitt, the loss of faith wasn't just about religion, it was about identity. About breaking free from expectations and carving out his own truth. He didn't leave God out of rebellion. He left because he could no longer pretend to believe. And in that quiet departure lies a story more profound than any sermon. Stay tuned, because the next story is even more intense. It's about a megastar who went from gospel music to public blasphemy. And the reasons behind it will leave you speechless. The next story takes us deep into the life of a man who once had the voice of an angel and the soul of a preacher's son. A man who seemed destined to walk the righteous path, but who would eventually declare in front of millions that he had given up on God entirely. This is the story of Kanye West. Before the fame, before the controversies, before the headlines and meltdowns, there was a boy in Chicago raised in the heart of Christian America. Kanye's mother, Donda West, was not only his greatest supporter, but a deeply spiritual woman. She instilled in him the belief that he was special, chosen, even anointed. And Kanye believed her. He grew up listening to gospel music, singing in church choirs, and absorbing sermons about grace, sin, and redemption. His early work in music reflected that faith. Songs like Jesus Walks were raw confessions of a man struggling with belief in a world of fame, temptation, and contradiction. The track became an anthem for those who felt too imperfect for religion, yet still yearned for divine connection. But as his star rose, Kanye's relationship with God became increasingly chaotic. He wasn't just a believer anymore. He began to see himself as a prophet, a vessel, even a Messiah. In interviews, he claimed God spoke directly to him. He called himself a creative genius, a visionary, and later simply Yeezus. He started blending religion with ego, spirituality with spectacle. For many, it was unsettling. But the real fracture came after the death of his mother in 2007. Donda's sudden passing shook Kanye to the core. He spiraled emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Many believe that her death marked the beginning of his slow unraveling, not just as an artist, but as a believer. Kanye began acting out in public, interrupting award shows, making bizarre statements, embracing radical political views. At times, he would swing back into faith, releasing gospel albums and holding Sunday services. But even these were steeped in confusion. His sermons were mixed with self-promotion. His lyrics praised God one moment and exalted himself the next. In one interview, he said, quote, "I am unquestionably, undoubtedly the greatest human artist of all time. It's not even a question at this point." He began to position himself not alongside God, but above him. What we were witnessing wasn't just a crisis of faith. It was a man trying to become his own religion. By the time he ran for president and started making outlandish claims about biblical prophecy, it was clear something had changed fundamentally. Fans who once saw him as a voice of truth were now unsure what he believed in, if anything at all. He went from pleading for Jesus to walking alone, convinced of his own divinity. It's hard to say exactly when Kanye lost faith in God, or whether he ever fully did. But what's clear is that the humble reverence of his youth had vanished, replaced by a storm of contradictions, delusions of grandeur, and spiritual confusion. He built a kingdom in his own image, and like all kings who forget who made them, he began to fall. Some still see flickers of the old Kanye, the one who knelt in prayer, who wept over loss, who sought forgiveness. But others believe he's crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. A man once desperate to walk with God now walks alone, lost in a maze of his own creation. And in that maze, faith is no longer the light that guides, but a shadow that haunts. But hold on, because the final story in this video may be the most surprising yet. It's about a star whose every word once praised the heavens, whose voice once lifted millions in praise, but who later admitted that he no longer believed in anything at all. And the reason for that loss will break your heart. Imagine growing up in the spotlight, adored by millions, praised for your angelic voice, and known as the embodiment of spiritual purity. Now imagine waking up one day, looking in the mirror, and realizing that everything you believed about yourself, your faith, and your purpose was gone. This is the heartbreaking journey of Whitney Houston, a woman whose voice was heaven-sent, but whose relationship with God unraveled in the silence between the songs. From the very beginning, Whitney's life was immersed in faith. She was born into a gospel dynasty. Her mother, Cissy Houston, was a celebrated gospel singer. Her cousin, Dionne Warwick, brought church harmonies to pop music. And Whitney herself was a shining star in the New Hope Baptist Church choir in Newark, New Jersey. She wasn't just singing, she was worshiping, she was testifying. She was preaching through melody. Her voice lifted congregations, brought people to tears, and made them believe in something higher. And when she broke into the mainstream with hits like How Will I Know and The Greatest Love of All, her image was spotless. A good girl, a church girl, a woman of faith. But behind that pristine image, Whitney was struggling. Fame was overwhelming. The expectations were suffocating. And the pressure to be perfect, to be the voice of heaven, was crushing her from the inside. She turned to drugs, alcohol, and toxic relationships to cope. And slowly, the faith that had once anchored her began to erode. In interviews, she would still mention God. She would still speak about prayer, about grace, about redemption. But there was a weariness in her eyes, a sadness that hinted at a deeper crisis. She wasn't just doubting the industry or the people around her, she was doubting herself. And perhaps, she was doubting the God she had grown up with. The turning point came during her turbulent marriage to Bobby Brown. Their relationship was chaotic, marred by addiction, violence, and public meltdowns. Whitney became a tabloid fixture. The once revered gospel princess was now mocked in headlines and memes. And through it all, she seemed increasingly disconnected from her faith. In one candid moment, she said, "The biggest devil is me. I'm either my best friend or my worst enemy." That wasn't just self-criticism. It was a confession. A sign that she no longer saw herself as the child of God she was raised to be. She was lost, not just to fame or addiction, but to spiritual despair. Her performances became erratic. Her voice, once golden, began to falter. And when she tried to make a comeback, it was clear something was missing. Not just the vocal precision, not just the energy, but the light, the faith, the belief that had once radiated from every note. Friends and family say she prayed, that she still believed, deep down. But the woman who once sang gospel with unshakable conviction now seemed to sing only for survival. The sparkle in her eyes was gone. The joy was gone. And on February 11, 2012, Whitney Houston was found dead in a hotel bathtub in Beverly Hills. The cause was accidental drowning, exacerbated by heart disease and drug use. But for many who loved her, it felt like something more. Like the final chapter in a spiritual tragedy. A girl born in faith, swallowed by fame, and abandoned by the very beliefs that once defined her. In the end, Whitney Houston's story is more than a cautionary tale. It's a heartbreaking reminder that even the most faithful among us can lose their way. That belief is fragile. That faith is not armor. It is a living, breathing part of us that must be nurtured, protected, and held close, even when the world tries to tear it away. She had it all. The voice, the beauty, the spirit. And yet, in the end, she died alone. Not just physically, but spiritually. Disconnected from the God she once sang to so beautifully. And that is perhaps the most haunting note of all. If you felt moved by any of these stories, please consider subscribing to this channel and sharing your thoughts below. Which story hit you the hardest? And are there other stars whose journeys of faith you'd like us to explore? We're just getting started.